Okay. All right. Is that you? Hi, Mark.
Hey, Marianne.
Hi, Melanie. So, Mark, so tonight, since this last night's meeting, in my mind anyway, it was for the trustees to get reports on everything. And then tonight is for the public. So I'll spend like 3 minutes in the very beginning or 2 minutes sort of telling the public why we did what we did on the 2 sites. And then, so not, like I'll say we did a phase 1 ESA behind town hall because it hadn't been used before. And before we approached it, we wanted to check the history. And that's kind of standard practice for a project like this. And then I'll say we tested the monitoring wells because they were there and it seemed like a good idea to test the water. And then we did, and then the reason why we did all the other work at Lot 032. The trustees already knew why we were doing all of that. So I didn't tell them, okay? And you knew why we were doing all of that, or anyway. So, oh, here are some more people.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Library Trustees. Thank you for joining us. Marianne, give people a couple more minutes to join.
Yeah, and then I thought, so we're not doing the minutes from last night.
No, this
no.
is more of a public question period, right?
Right.
On the report
Yes.
that Mark and Erica have put together for us.
Right. And so we'll give people another minute or so to join. And then I thought I would just sort of explain why we did all of this and why we did what we did where. So, you folks were all aware of why we were doing all of that, but I'll explain it to them since this meeting's more about the public.
Yep.
I'll do that.
Sounds good. Let's start at 6:35, and I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping about how we're going to take questions, and expectations for how long the meeting's going to be and stuff like that before we get it rolling. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and Tim. Yep, 5 trustees, and Savannah wasn't feeling well, so she's not going to join us. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. I got that message, but we do have a quorum, and this is a proper meeting. One thing I'd like to ask you to do, Marianne, before we do the housekeeping is just to make the announcement about the meeting being recorded.
Yes. So hi, everybody. This is a regular open trustees of the library meeting, and it is being held on Zoom because it's a pandemic and it's safer to meet virtually. And the meeting is being recorded, and the recording will be on file with the town clerk's office until the minutes are posted. So if people weren't able to participate because it was a virtual meeting, they can watch the recording afterwards.
Right. Thank you. It's great to see so many people here tonight. So Melanie, you're taking minutes as usual tonight?
Yep, I'm on it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Can I ask a clarifying question? I'm looking at the participants to add the names of the participants to the minutes. What do I do if someone just says Barbara's iPad?
We can,
Um,
we
Go
can
ahead,
ask
Kate.
Barbara for her last name, I think.
Oh, okay.
Barbara, would you mind sharing your last name, please, and spelling it for us?
So
Are you on-
BZ, you're muted. And that's. okay.
Sorry.
Oh, it's
Um,
BZ Riley.
Yes, Barbara's
Oh.
my real name. It's my hidden identity.
Okay.
All right, sorry.
No worries.
And Molly's just changed her name to Molly Moss so that we know her last name. All right, we'll give people one more minute and then we'll get rolling.
You're taking that from the list of participants, Melanie?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Yes.
okay.
So before we get started this evening, I did want to thank Mark and Erica with OTO for joining us tonight for to present the findings of their report and to answer questions. We are going to take questions in the following ways. If you are on Zoom and have the ability to raise your hand, if you look at the bottom of your screen, for at least for me as a Windows user, you'll see a raised hand function. And when you do push that, click that, it puts your little hand up in the left corner, and I will notice that and add you to the question queue. We are going to try to keep a rotation of questions. So if you've asked your question, you may be asked to wait until other people have had a chance to ask one before you come back in. Okay, so that we can have the maximum opportunity for people to ask questions and get answers tonight. Finally, if you are not able to use Zoom in the way that many of us can, usually because you're calling in on a regular telephone, then we encourage you to send your question by email to this address, to librarytrustees@shutesbury.org. Our co-chair, Michelle Regan-Ladd, is going to be monitoring that address tonight. So if you are able to send an email instead of asking your question via Zoom, we will take questions by email this evening. And finally, before I turn it over to Marianne to provide some context, and then to Mark O'Malley and Erica Escobar to explain their findings, I'm just going to ask Amanda, is that Amanda Alix? I just want to make sure that we've got people's full names. Amanda, is that right?
Yes.
Great, thank you very much. All right, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Marianne to give us the context under which this environmental testing was performed on our behalf. Go ahead, Marianne, thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, everybody, for being here. So everybody knows we're applying for a public library construction grant, and we're considering two different sites. We're considering the town-owned land behind Town Hall, and we're considering Lot 032. And it is standard practice in a public project like this to do an environmental assessment on a parcel or a property before undertaking a construction project, a municipal construction project. So for the land behind Town Hall, which is one of our two potential sites, we did what's called a phase 1 environmental site assessment, which is basically a study of the historic use of the property. And then that study informs whether or not further investigation is warranted. So back in 2010, we did a phase 1 ESA on Lot 032. And because of the historic use of the property, further testing at the time was warranted. And there was quite extensive testing of Lot 032 in 2011 and 2012. So the phase 1 ESA suggested some targeted soil samples. The targeted samples showed trace amounts of PCBs, and then extensive following up testing at that time could never duplicate those results and didn't show any other concerning compounds. But at Lot 032, there were, so there was that, that horrible 3-bay garage that was in disrepair and was an eyesore, in my opinion. And and then there were piles of debris, so household trash and car parts and tires. And at the time, the DEP recommended that the building come down. There had been a floor drain in the building, and floor drains in old garages were a source of concern, you know, or a red flag that warranted further investigation. And the DEP recommended doing some targeted soil sampling underneath the building and any place we would be doing digging in a construction project. And then at the sites of those debris piles after they were cleaned up. So they said, take down the building, clean up the debris piles, and then dig there and see if you find anything. So that's why we did the soil borings. And we did soil borings where the garage was and around where the garage was, and then in places that we would likely be digging if we were building a building there. So where we would be putting the septic system, and where we'd be putting the building and the parking area. So you'll see when I show the locations of the borings, that's where the bulk of them are clustered. And then there were piles of debris further back in the woods that were cleaned up, and that's where we did more of the borings. And we did 10 borings in total. And then, you know, water quality, if you're going to have a public building, you want to know that the groundwater is good. So in home construction, it's often, if somebody's buying land to build a home, it's often recommended that they drill a well first and test the groundwater and make sure that there's potable water before they purchase a property. So we had, and that's not standard practice for this particular project, or it's not a requirement, but we had monitoring wells, town-owned monitoring wells on both pieces of property. We had the monitoring wells that the town put in, I think in 2014. There are 5 of them around town, and there just happens to be one behind Town Hall and one at Lot 032. And it made good sense to me to go ahead and test, while we were going to have Mark out here doing site investigation, to go ahead and test that groundwater and see if we had potable water or water with concerning, you know, compounds in them at either of those 2 sites. So that's why we tested the water. It was us sort of doing extra due diligence, which, you know, I think nobody would be surprised at me doing extra due diligence. So with that, we've got Mark O'Malley and Erica Escobar from O'Reilly Talbot Okun. They're the environmental firm that did the work for us, and they will explain the reports. All of the reports are on the Small Library Pilot Project webpage, which is the link off of mnspear.org. And I will put some of them, I will share the screen of the soil borings. The other screens are just a bunch of words. I mean, if people want to see them, I can put up the other reports too, but people can look at the website.
Marianne,
yeah.
excuse me, this is Linda Scott, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I can see that there are people in the waiting room.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Thank you for letting me know.
You're
okay. Okay. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mark and Erica. Okay.
Marianne, since there were people in the waiting room, was there just one person?
I saw one person.
Okay, I just, Diane, is that Diane, and your last name is spelled Jacoby? Can I just ask you to confirm?
Yes, that's correct.
Great. So you were with us last night, so I think you're familiar with the context, and so we're not going to reprise that. Sorry, it took us a little while to let you in, but we're going to turn it right over to Mark and Erica now, please. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everybody. I'm Mark from OTO. We'll start first, I guess, discussing our report for the parcels behind the town hall. This, as Marianne mentioned, this is kind of a look at the history of the property, looking at old maps, old aerial photos, federal and state regulatory databases, and local information provided by Marianne and Becky. In summary, our report found no recognized environmental conditions according with the ASTM. It's kind of a national standard of testing, and so there's not much to say about that. These parcels behind the town hall, there appears to be some historical use as a burial ground, and that was addressed back in the 1930s when the town built the center school, which then became the town hall. I think the burial ground, from the information provided by Marianne, the burial ground was addressed, and bodies and pieces were relocated to another cemetery in town. We tested the water from the monitoring well at this location. It was clear, clean, and free of volatile organic compounds, PCBs, and a very trace amount of PFAS was detected below applicable DEP standards. Does anyone have any particular questions regarding that assessment?
But just to recap for the people who are joining us, if you're able to raise your hand by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen, at least on Windows, that is preferable. If you're unable to submit a question by doing that because you're calling on your phone, please send an email to librarytrustees@shutesbury.org. Michelle Regan-Ladd will be monitoring that for questions throughout tonight's meeting. Thank you. Mark, if there's no questions, you can just proceed, I think.
Muted, Mark.
I think you're on mute.
We'll move on to the work done at lot 032. This was kind of a totally different type of assessment. This involved drilling holes in the ground using a small track-mounted drill rig, pulling dirt out of the ground and screening it in the field with a field meter, and sending one sample from each boring location to a laboratory for chemical analysis. As Marianne had mentioned, the bulk of the work was done in the front field portion of the property. This area is kind of where you guys are thinking about potentially putting a library in the future. We did a boring in where the old kind of automobile garage was. We did a boring behind where the garage was, where PCBs were formerly detected. Marianne, if you kind of scroll down to figure 3, that kind of shows the detail in the garage area. If you just scroll down to the
Really?
next figure,
Oh, okay.
that
Okay.
kind of gives you a little more
Okay.
detail.
Okay.
This aerial photo still shows the garage, but you guys know was recently demoed. So You can see we did a boring kind of right in the center of where the garage was, one out back by B2, one on the side of the garage, and then borings 4, 5, and 6 are kind of in the general, or 4 and 5 are in the general footprint of where the proposed library may go. And 6 is where the septic system may go. And further out into the woods, borings B7 and borings B8 were where you guys indicated some debris and trash had been removed recently. Basically, our findings from the area, we didn't find anything of significance. No stinky soil, and the samples we sent to the laboratory were analyzed for volatile organic compounds. These are things like solvents and gasoline compounds. We analyzed for PCBs, petroleum, and we did not find any constituents of concern from this front area of significance. Marianne, if you please scroll back up to the other figure that kind of shows the broader parcel. Apologize, this is, the way we had to orientate it on our sheet. It's north is to the left and the south is to the right. Further out in the back portion, we did another boring B10 near a pile of debris that had been removed, and boring B9, which was next to the remains of a concrete pad. We assume this concrete pad may be associated with an old radio tower that was on the property. And at boring B9, we found some smelly soil, which yielded a kind of an elevated result on our field meter. That sample was sent to the laboratory and yielded some trace levels of volatile organic compounds and slightly elevated petroleum compounds, which require reporting to DEP. Any questions? Okay.
Meryl has her hand raised.
Thanks, Marianne. It's hard for me to see everybody.
Yeah. Okay.
I just put it up. My question is, how elevated are on B9 and how about B10? Was that clear? And if it is elevated, is it still within acceptable limits? And how do we find out how extensive those volatile organic compounds extend into the property?
Marianne, if you kind of scroll up in our document, you'll find there should be a summary table of the results showing like the chemical compounds detected. Yeah, this here, up one more, there should be a table 1. There we are. So on this table, you're seeing what's under this VPH fractions. These are groups of hydrocarbons that are kind of clumped together and analyzed concurrently. And if you look at the first one right here, we detected 100 parts per million, milligrams per kilogram. And that is exactly equal to the reportable concentration under the Massachusetts Contingency Plan. The Massachusetts Contingency Plan is a set of regulations by DEP governing, releases of oil or hazardous chemicals to the environment. If you are equal to or exceed these concentrations on the right column, it triggers a 120-day notification requirement to DEP. The reason why you have 120 days is you're allowed to do some other assessment within that 120-day period to kind of maybe either refute the finding, or you can remediate it within that time period. But given that this location's way out in the woods, jumping right into like kind of excavation and remediating the problem is not really a practical solution. So we would recommend further assessment out here, further soil testing, maybe a test pit right in the area. Maybe there's still the remains of an old underground tank. We would have to put together a more detailed list for a proposal for further testing. These compounds that we detected have a very strong signature of gasoline. If you look down, we detected benzene, ethylbenzene, and some of the trace level VOCs. Those are all gasoline compounds that are commonly associated with releases of gasoline to the environment. Did that answer your question enough, Barbara?
It was Merrill that asked, and
Oh,
yes,
Meryl, sorry.
no problem. And it did pretty much answer my question. Was it the B10 location though, was that one, did that also have findings that were above the limits or at the limits or not?
No, we detected nothing in B10.
Oh, good. Okay. So this was the only boring that showed any even close to reportable, the only one reportable level, and it's way out on the property, nowhere, in the immediate area of where the library would most likely be sited.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And Mark, last night, this is Kate, last night you said that you thought that this was your experience with gasoline, was that this is not something that typically migrates. Am I remembering that correctly?
Well, gasoline will migrate, but it all depends on kind of the volume of gasoline released to the environment and the age at which it's released and the media it's moving through. There's unlikely to be, a school bus size underground tank out here, which would release, 10,000 gallons. This is likely a much smaller volume of a release. Mass DEP's published a lot of information discussing petroleum hydrocarbon releases, such as gasoline and heating oil, fuel oil. And a lot of that research and stuff has said that, right around 400 feet from the source is pretty much where you start to find that the chemicals naturally break down in the environment and no longer pose a significant risk. So it's very unlikely that this is migrated far enough to reach someone's drinking well at a detectable level.
Thank you. Just recognize Mike Binsky has a question. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm hearing from Mark is that at this point, instead of refuting this or doing any remediation, he's suggesting that we need to do more testing. If that is correct, is that what the town of Shutesbury is going to do, or where are we at as far as moving forward with dealing with this this one thing that's right at the reporting level?
So Mike, if I may, that is beyond the remit of the library trustees. So it's really not a decision that we, an answer that we're able to give you this evening. Sorry, but it's beyond our scope of responsibility.
All right, then let me rephrase it then. So with this information, what does that mean for the potential of building a new library at this site?
And, we are still sort of presenting to the public these findings and wanting to listen to people's response to them, but we have not made a decision or a recommendation. We don't, a decision on our recommendation. Our process is to make a recommendation to the select board, but we have not arrived at that recommendation as of yet. We're still in the sort of fact finding stage on this.
Okay, thanks.
You bet. Just looking to see if anyone else has questions at this point. Thank you, that helps, Marianne. Go ahead, Eric.
Eric has, okay.
Just very quickly from the select board to answer Mike's question, this is all very recent information and nothing has been decided at the select board level. I can tell you that in terms of that remediation, whether or not we'd even have to pay for it, like it was a military radio tower. So maybe the federal government have to pay for it if something did happen. So nothing's happened. The bottom line is nothing's happened, and we're just waiting to sort of see what to do, basically.
Thanks a lot, Eric. Appreciate that. Anyone else have questions? I'm going to ask people to remember to put their hands down so that I can keep track of who is next in the queue. Do you have any other questions at this point?
Diane raised her hand.
Thank you. Go ahead, Diane.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. Voters at the town meeting recently approved using the land behind town hall for a community garden. And at yesterday's meeting, there was discussion about using this land for a library site. And this is the first I've heard of that idea, and I've been coming to a lot of these meetings. So I'm a little confused. And I'm wondering whether the trustees are proposing taking land away from the community garden site, which was previously approved at town meeting. And is there going to be another action at town meeting to decide this?
Thank you. Marianne, both of these sites have been under consideration for the whole of the process. We have announced that they were both being tested several times. The test results for both are now available. There's been a lot of information coming your way and our way. And if this wasn't clear, it's regrettable, but we have announced that both of these sites were under consideration from the beginning of the site selection process. Marianne, would you like to speak to the status of the community garden at this point to your understanding? Thank you.
So I've been in communication with the Recreation Committee since before town meeting. This project came up shortly before town meeting, and we knew that we would have to do site selection. The Rec Committee already had the ball rolling for the community gardens. The community gardens are a small area behind town hall, and the Rec Committee and the library are actually quite excited about the possibility of working together. Putting a library behind town hall would create a water source for the community gardens where there currently is none. So the Rec Committee has generously agreed to wait out this process and see what unfolds. And they are excited about the idea of being able to enhance the community gardens by the library being there and have the community gardens enhance the library at the same time. So the putting the library behind town hall doesn't mean community gardens can't happen. It means they'll be better.
Yeah, and just to reiterate that point, it certainly doesn't mean they can't happen there. There's so much space back there.
Yes.
And
There's like 25 town-owned acres. And then you asked about voting on this. So the select board has jurisdiction over town property, and then town meeting will be, if we're offered the grant will be contingent on the site that is selected and proposed in the grant application. And then town meeting will be voting on accepting the grant if we're offered the grant. So it's a whole package. And Lot 032 and the land behind Town Hall are both parcels that we considered back in 2009, 2010, 2011. And, you know, from the very beginning of this process, we've gone back to the drawing board. We didn't make any assumptions about where the library would be or what it would look like. We started from scratch and looked at the two viable town-owned parcels. And we've been doing that from the very beginning.
Thank you, Mary Ann. So as I said at the top, we're going to ask, before I give you the floor back, just want to make sure that no one else has a question since you have had a chance to ask one. So just giving people a couple of seconds. All right, seeing none, go ahead, please, Mike. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I just kind of following on what Diane just asked. I just, you know, you're saying that the site behind Town Hall has been considered from day one and everything. And I don't happen to recall that town meeting when we're talking about putting a garden back there, that there was any mention that there is a possibility that the library might be going in that spot. And the fact that, you know, I don't know if the trustees or Mary Ann or whoever has been talking with the recreation committee, was that during an open public meeting, or when was that taking place? I'm very concerned that a lot of these decisions, a lot of these activities are taking place without the ability of citizens to know what's going on. And it's just very disconcerting that we voted $20,000 to put a garden in behind the town hall, and the next thing we know, well, now it's being considered as a site for the library. It just seems very odd, the process that's taken place to get to where we are.
Well, okay, Mike, I will just say a couple of things in response. First of all, I know that I myself posted on Nextdoor during one of the library updates that we were considering and testing both of these sites, and that we didn't have the test results available yet, but that we would post them and discuss them in public when we had them. So that is clear. Again, it's a lot of information and it's easy to miss stuff, but this has been transparent. It's been discussed in trustee meetings. It's been minuted, and it's been made public through various channels. So that's the first thing that I would say. I'd let Mary Ann speak to how the conversations with the rec committee have happened, but I will say that, again, there is nothing about a potential library site behind Town Hall that would preclude the use of that space also for a community garden. It seems clear to trustees. My sense of the trustees' feeling is that this is a great opportunity if we do end up receiving the grant and recommending that site, that the garden would have a ready water source. As I understand it, the previous proposal for water was that it come over in large buckets from the fire station, which seems like a lot of effort and work, and that a community garden that has a ready and easy access to water is much more likely to be successful. So I'm going to pause there and see if Mary Ann or any trustees have anything to add to that.
I'm just going to add that it would also, add the ability for people to be able to drive closer to the gardens. You know, the plan, the really excellent plan, given the resources that the town had, was that people would park in town hall parking and then cart their stuff out to the gardens. And then, you know, this pilot project came up and, you know, came up quickly. And I haven't actually attended a recreation committee meeting. I have had conversations with the chairperson of the committee, and I understand that they've discussed it in their committee meetings, and they check in with me every once in a while. I check in with them and tell them the progress that we're making. And so, you know, so the good thing about community preservation grants is they're not, you know, they're not just a fiscal year grant. That grant will stay there and they'll be able to use it when they're ready. You know, so it may be, you know, just a slight delay in the beginning of that garden, or it may be hardly a delay at all. I think that's all the information I have.
Thank you, Marianne. So Meryl, I see you. And again, following practice, if anyone else who hasn't spoken or asked a question wants to jump in, you're welcome to. I also want to say that I'm sensitive to the fact that we have a couple of professionals with us this evening in Mark and Erica. And if we are done questioning them and seeking to understand their findings and their implications, then I suggest that we release them from the meeting. We have another 19 minutes, if my arithmetic is correct, for this conversation tonight, and they don't necessarily need to stick around for it. So let me ask, does anyone have any further questions for Mark or Erica, who've done the field testing and the reporting back? Okay, I am not seeing any unless Meryl's is. So let me see what Meryl's is about. And if it's not related to that, then Mark and Erica, just really thank you again for your time and your expertise in explaining explaining your findings. Meryl, over to you.
Thank you. And my question was not for Mark or Erica or Mark. So thank you.
I think I think we'll just excuse them with their gratitude from the meeting.
Thank you.
Maybe you can like have dinner
you.
or something.
Thank you
Okay.
both. Okay.
Thank you on
very
behalf of
much.
OTO. Thank you very
It was
much.
nice to see you again, both of you.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you so much for
Bye.
Thank you.
everything. Okay.
Okay, Meryl, over to you, please.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I just wanted to remind everyone that this is a dynamic process. So at town meeting, I don't believe this grant was even known about, so they couldn't have proposed.
No, we took a vote on it at town meeting.
Oh, we
Meryl,
did,
just
okay.
For accuracy, we
But
took a
it did-
vote allowing us to apply for it.
That's right, that's right. I'm sorry, that is
It's okay.
correct. But nonetheless, it is a dynamic process and new information is coming in all the time. And it's been clear to me that the trustees have made an unbelievable effort to reach out and share information regularly and as widely as possible. And if people aren't listening, there's nothing you can do about it. You're trying to get the information out there. You have a very active website that you're getting it out there. You're, trying whatever means you can through town announce and other locations. So I want to commend you on that and just remind everyone that this is a rolling process. As you learn more information, you look at the options, make decisions, and move on to the next thing. So, to say that things are not being considered heavily and fairly and letting people know about it is not accurate. So that's all I wanted to say about that. But I appreciate the effort you're making to do that. It's actually
you.
heroic what you're doing.
Thank you. I'm sure all trustees appreciate that. At the same time, just acknowledging we are working very hard to keep up with the time frame, the demands for information that are part of the process. And it's a lot. And so if people miss things, it's understandable. And I don't think it necessarily implies a lack of attention. I think there's just a lot. It's a lot for us. I know trustees have been working really, really hard just to keep up and to keep ahead of the flow. Really appreciate your comment. Thanks, Meryl. Amanda, please go ahead. You're muted, Amanda.
That happened. Hi. I just want to make sure I understand a couple of things that were said last night. Is it true that if the town decides not to develop lot 032, that we will not have to do any sort of cleanup if DEP decides that happens, or will we have to do it anyway? I'm not
I
sure.
don't think we know yet.
Okay.
We have to report, is
Right.
my understanding, because we have a reportable finding. And then there is the period, I believe Mark said it was 120 days.
Yeah.
Where we can choose from a range of options in terms of further testing, see if those levels are repeatable. And I see Marianne trying to get in, so go ahead, Marianne.
Okay. All right. So we have 20 days, 120 days to report it to DEP. In that 120 days, an entity could do further testing or choose to do remediation, or take other steps to find more information, before completing the reporting to DEP. But no matter what, it has to be reported to DEP. And then no matter what, more investigation has to be done. And then depending on the results of further investigation, further remediation may or may not be warranted.
Okay, and that's regardless of whether we choose as a town to develop the site or not. It's all
Right.
based on what DEP says. Okay.
Right.
That's my understanding too.
Okay. Because I know that last night Rita Farrell seemed very concerned about a lot of costs that could be coming out of this. So I was wondering, hey, is there a way to avoid that? But it sounds like maybe there isn't. So.
Well, I mean, again, there may be, it may be possible to determine who's responsible for that. But, as Rita said last night, if we're chasing the federal government or the Department of Defense, it may be a little while. Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, right. I would depend on that. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. I saw Melanie next and then Brad. And Amanda, I'm going to ask you to put your hand down, if you will, just because it helps me keep track of. Yeah, great. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I'm going to say the same thing that Marianne said, but in a different way, which is just that regardless of whether a library or any other building is sited there, there needs to be further testing, there needs to be action taken based on the further testing, and there would need to be some sort of remediation if that was required. So the two things are separate. Like if the site needs to be cleaned up, the site needs to be cleaned up.
Yeah.
Period. Just want to make that
Thank you.
super clear.
Thanks, Melanie. So I'm going to go to Brad next and then Mike.
And I'm adding to what both of you just said. If the library was sited at Lot 032, and it was determined that remediation would need to be done, that not be the responsible of the library building project. That would be the responsibility of town. It's far enough away so it doesn't actually impact the environmental part of it, doesn't impact the library project. If the library project was behind town hall, the town still is responsible to deal with whatever's there. And in either case, whether the library was on 032 or behind town hall, I think what the town would want to do is to see if the military would take care of it, because it was probably their problem, but all that is a process to be done. And so my main point is, either way, it doesn't have a direct impact on the library. One of the things that Rita brought up was that if it was determined that there was extensive remediation that was needed, I don't care who's paying for it. Maybe it's the federal government, but if there is a lot of remediation, the easiest access is right by the new library site. And that was a concern that does impact us as trustees. I listened to that and I thought, that's not really what I would wish for the library, but there's a lot of unknowns there. And reiterating what Marianne and what Melanie said, because of where it's sited on the site, even if the library was chosen to be there, it's not part of this project. It's a town issue on its own. That's all.
Thank you, Brad. Mike, again, before I give you the floor, I'm just going to check and see if anyone else has questions. Okay, I'm not seeing any, so Mike, go right ahead. Thanks.
Oh, thanks. So I'm kind of losing track of the timeline here. So 120 days from when, I guess, is my first question.
So Mike,
no.
I mean, Marianne, you can answer, but again,
Go
this
ahead,
is not,
Kate. Okay.
this is not, dealing with this is not within the scope of the library trustees. Okay, and it's not part of our charge as your elected officials in this area. And so I really don't want to get us to give you the impression that we either have responsibility or know what we're talking about in this area. Marianne has knowledge that she's willing to share, and that's great, but this is not our remit. Okay, Marianne, go ahead if you will.
I think that's really our answer, Kate, but Mike can go to the website and look at the date on the report, and that's day one. Okay.
Okay, all right then. So I guess what I'm concerned about is that it's not a library problem. Whatever's contaminated at 032, it's not a library problem. But if the library is built on that site and then the town has to remediate it, now you've got a library building in the path of the remediation. I'm a little concerned about that. And then the fact that I think the site selection has to be established by December 3rd. So what's the thinking of the trustees as far as the information they have now about 032 and behind town hall? Then what's that's like 6 weeks away. What's the thinking as to where this library is going to be?
Well, I'm going to answer that question the same way I answered it before, which is that trustees are still reviewing. There's like 100 pages of reporting here. We have heard and asked questions of the specialists who came on with us. We have a meeting scheduled for Monday where this is the primary question, and we will be considering it. I don't know whether we will be prepared after Monday's meeting to make a recommendation. This is a really serious issue, and we're going to take our time to make sure we do it right and to make sure that we give the select board time to do their reflection, their research, and make their call. But I will say that if we are considering this in terms of citing the library for sure, but we don't think, based on what we can see from here, that we will be talking about a library in the way of remediation. This is a large space, and we can imagine that
Kate, can I just interrupt you for a minute? There's a,
Yeah.
noise interruption. Is anyone else hearing that? Yeah, okay.
Oh,
Is everyone else muted? Besides Kate? Could we just check on that to make sure that it's not?
most people are, but I think Marianne isn't.
Okay. I
is
mean,
it
I don't
the-
know the source, but I'm just trying to,
Yeah, is
Yeah.
it better now?
yeah, it's better.
Okay, I'm gonna blame my kids, sorry, y'all. So yeah, Mike, obviously you are welcome to attend the meetings where we, the open meetings as everyone is, where we make these, have these deliberations and prepare to make this recommendation. But I can't tell you now what we're gonna choose. We need to take the time that we need to make this really serious consultation, collaboration, deliberation before we recommend. Do any trustees want to add anything, or Mary Ann want to add anything to that?
Shall
Um,
I speak, Kate?
right,
or
there we go.
Mary Ann?
I think Monday evening you will, you'll weigh the pros and cons and see if you're ready to make a decision. And then this is on the select board's agenda for Tuesday.
Yeah.
So we'll also be in conversation with them.
Thank you. And I saw Brad's hand go up. Go ahead, please, Brad.
So, Mike, as we have with all of these things, the whole point of all these meetings is to listen to people, and so we noted Rita's comment last night, and but as Kate, Mary Ann said, we haven't met to have our own discussion. So you're asking for the future and we can't tell you until we get to that meeting. But we did hear the comment, we did note it. I'm very happy that we're having these public meetings and hearing all sorts of comments, and that we're reflecting on those. That's our job. And our job is to reflect on it in our own meeting when we get to that.
Thank you, Brad. Are there any other questions or comments? I'm conscious of the time. This is the second or maybe third. I've lost track of how many meetings we've had this week. It's been a bunch. So are there any more questions or comments before we wrap up this evening? And Michelle, just checking, we didn't have any questions come through via the email. Thanks a lot for monitoring that. I really appreciate it. All right, last call, as we say. All right, then I really want to thank everyone who's joined us this evening, the trustees and guests. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your thoughts, your comments, your input. We are taking this decision about citing very seriously. We're hearing you very clearly in your questions, Mike. A lot of the questions that you're asking are questions that we're asking ourselves. And I have already started drawing up my own personal pro and con sheet. I'm sure other trustees are working on that as well, on theirs as well, so that we can come to Monday's meeting with a good process for consideration. Last call before we wrap. All right, I'm hearing none, so I will just thank everyone again and appreciate it, and remind you that our next meeting is on Monday night, and you are welcome to join us if you can find time. Thanks, everyone.